Well, I want to welcome everybody to our webinar on navigating CMMC with C3 and Conquest Cyber. Lots of C's in this webinar title today. We'll spend about an hour talking about CMMC, the process, some pieces of the process about getting certified, and a new partnership between C3 and Conquest Cyber that will help make that process run a bit more efficiently and hopefully a little faster for folks. Let's get started. Like I said, we have Bill Wootton with us. He's the president of C3 Integrated Solutions. And we also have Ben Tosado, who is the senior vice president of digital transformation at Conquest Cyber. I'll let Bill talk a little bit about C3 and a little bit about himself. He'll run through the presentation, and then you'll get to hear more about Ben and about Conquest Cyber. So, gentlemen, go for it. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Karen, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Just going to take a minute, kind of walk through the agenda, set some expectations for today. We'll take a minute or two, talk about C3 and our partnership with Conquest Cyber that we're really excited about. We're going to take a couple minutes just to talk about CMMC and do a quick level set for the CMMC program, and then we'll dive into the CMMC Readiness Program that we've put on and put together for our client base. That's going to walk through various components of the program, talk about how we work with small and mid-sized contractors in the defense industrial base. And then we're also going to talk about how Conquest Cyber's SIOPS program fits into our model and how it adds just really another dimension to the services that we've been able to offer to our clients for a few years now. That's when Ben's going to take over, talk a little bit about the ARMED program, the monitoring and management capabilities, as well as the dashboards that are available, and such as Inspect, that really give you a lot of insight into not just your securities posture, but your compliance posture as well. And then finally, we'll do some questions at the end of the day. So let's get started. First, just a little bit about C3 Integrated Solutions. We are, also, as I get started, we'll turn the video off so you guys can concentrate on the presentation. So anyway, C3 Integrated Solutions. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary as a Microsoft partner. We've been in business for about 13 years now. We actually signed our license agreement the month that Office 365 got launched. So we've been there really since the beginning, through the experience of selling, administering, managing, deploying Office 365 all along. And then for clients and companies who are in the defense industrial base, probably more relevantly, we've been selling, licensing, administering GCC High for almost 3 years now as well. So we've kind of got in on the ground floor with DFARS and with NIST compliance. We've been working these controls for a long time, and it's really given us a really deep experience on what folks in the defense industry are going through, especially now that CMMC is becoming more and more relevant to everyone in the industry. We have well over 200 clients under administration from Microsoft 365 perspective, and almost half, well, actually a little bit over half of those are defense business clients. Again, giving us that deep understanding of the use cases, the scenarios, the challenges that you guys go through on a day-to-day basis, and how those apply to mapping out CMMC compliance. Relative to the GCC High space, in addition to working with Microsoft on the program, in addition to providing thought leadership wherever possible, we've also been able to lead the industry in a couple of areas. Last year, we were able to partner with AvePoint Public Sector to be able to launch GCC High backup services. We were the first ones to kind of help them bring to market. And then over the summer, we were able to address one of the more painful user needs in being able to provide a truly hosted voice solution that could integrate with GCC High. We worked with our partners over at Call Tower on that. So we're really proud to be able to kind of not just support the program, but also bring new ideas and new concepts to it as well. We're really excited to talk about our C3 and Conquest Cyber partnership. We've been working together for almost a year and a half, 2 years now on various numbers of projects. We've worked across with each other, helping support various types of implementations. And now we're really excited to kind of formalize this and really become a part of the Conquest family in terms of being able to provide those services. We'll go into a lot more detail as we go through today about how Conquest fits into our model and how it really just adds another layer that helps our clients get a little bit further towards compliance and be able to, more importantly, be prepared for compliance relative to their auditing and their mapping and all of those types of capabilities. So just spending a moment with CMMC. We're going to make an assumption that for the most part, everyone has heard about CMMC and has a basic understanding of it. But just to level set the audience, CMMC is obviously a new set of cybersecurity rules for the defense industry. It builds upon the clauses of DFAR 7012 and the standards of NIST 800-171, and that all defense contractors will need to be certified at least at level 1. That's a population of over 300,000 companies, and the estimates right now are probably 50,000, and I've seen estimates even higher than that, are going to need a level 3 certification as well. And that's certainly the challenging one that's relative to holding CUI information. It's also important to note that additional federal agencies are considering CMMC. I think DHS has already made some signals that they are looking very closely at how the model rolls out. And at least from a government bureaucracy standpoint, that's going to happen fairly quickly as we see the CMMC program roll out. The last part to obviously talk about is the fact that the CMMC program is now kind of in its ramp-up phase. The interim rule that went into effect in November implemented clauses 7019, 7020, and 7021. I'm sure everyone's spending a lot of time on 7019, the answer to mail, trying to figure out how to do 7020. There's a whole level of content we could probably put together on that. But the CMMC model itself is a 7021 clause, and that starts that 5-year ramp up to get the program implemented towards the entire industry. So when we talk about CMMC and what does it mean, it's all about protecting data. At a level 1 level, you're looking at protecting federal contract information. And then at level 3, if you are holding, storing, processing, or transiting CUI or controlled unclassified information, you are going to land in a level 3 requirement in terms of certification. And that includes a combination of both practices and processes. Those practices are built on the NIST 800-171 standard. It's basically that standard plus an additional 20 or so controls. But the real challenge for a lot of folks is not just the practices, but the processes as well. It's one thing to meet a control by putting in a multi-factor authentication or a monitoring solution or some other capability and being able to check the technical box to it. But the maturity piece where you need to layer in processes and policies, and then you need to be able to demonstrate as they call, a habitual and persistent demonstration of actually doing the work and making sure all of that capability is aligned to what you have deployed. That's where the process piece comes in, and that's a real challenge for a lot of companies. That's one of the biggest areas that I think Conquest differentiates themselves in the way that their tools actually help demonstrate not just adherence, but maturity to the processes as well. So for us, when we look at the defense industrial market, we look at the challenge that the industry is facing, especially with small and mid-market firms. Everyone talks about the fact that small and mid-market are the most vulnerable, that they could easily be the weak link, and that's where folks are going to attack systems. And we look at this for a couple of reasons. First is maturity. In a lot of cases, small and mid-market firms are underinvested in IT services and certainly cybersecurity services. We also see when we work with our clients and they first come to us that there's little or no documentation. If you've not made an investment to go after an ISO or a CMMI certification, very rarely is there any real standard documentation around the IT services. Another challenge for small and mid-market companies is resources. There's very little, sometimes there's no IT staff, there's very rarely a cybersecurity staff. In a lot of cases, we have a couple of clients that have over 1,000 users and less than 3 people running the entire show from an IT standpoint. So they're entirely stretched too thin. And when we add in the challenge of CMMC, it just becomes a little bit overwhelming. And then finally, instituting that culture of cybersecurity. In a lot of cases, when we first work with clients, cybersecurity is just not relevant. It's not in the conversation. And there's a big shift to get them into a mode that they believe that cybersecurity is important, and it's got to be part of the culture of the organization. So when we look at the solution to this challenge, what we do is we start with the Microsoft Cloud. As I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of work with GCC High, but all of the work that we do in GCC High, we can take the same approach regardless of the version of the cloud. That might be GCC or commercial, but it all kind of works the same in terms of our strategy towards meeting what we need to do to get to CMMC. Same thing applies for Azure and Azure Government. We're doing a ton of work in Azure Government. There's some great tools that Microsoft's rolling out to really aid the ability to deploy an Azure Government environment and meet all of the controls and requirements of CMMC. Two other key pieces to us are being incremental and being modular. For a client that is starting in a somewhat immature space, building from a foundation and adding services incrementally is critical to making sure that we're doing things in a methodical approach and doing things in a way that doesn't overwhelm our client or throw too much of them at once. And then finally, we need to understand and be aware that sometimes clients already have other services deployed, and we need to do this in a way that is modular and bolts into whatever is there and takes advantage of the investments that have already been made. For us, this means the CMMC Readiness Program. And our objectives on this are to really take that methodical approach. We tend to take a technology forward approach with our readiness program. And the idea is if you know you're not in a great spot from a CMMC readiness standpoint, if you've not invested in cyber, if you've not gone and gotten an ISO or some other baseline standard where you've done a lot of this work, readiness assessments are not going to have a lot of value because you already know you're going to fail a large portion of it. Whereas when we take a technology forward approach, we can start by putting you into the right platforms, get you into the right cloud platform, get you into the right solutions, so that then we can build incrementally, not just the deployment of the services, but also then layer on the security services in a smart and methodical sort of way. And the idea behind this is to build maturity around the technology. It's one thing to write a policy, it's another thing to deploy a solution. Those things need to match. And from our perspective, in a lot of cases, we can deploy a large amount of the technology and allow those policies and the procedures to get wrapped around to the services we deploy. And that pretty much guarantees on day one, you're going to be a few steps along the way in terms of being mature because everything's already going to be in sync. And then finally, when we work with our clients and we deploy our services, what we typically will do with a lot of our set processes is we've already mapped them to various compliance controls. We can give you those mappings. I want to make sure to point out that we don't provide that compliance professionalism and we don't provide the documentation, but we help you get there, and we work with a lot of folks who do that, so we can always partner with whoever's either already with the client or make referrals if necessary. So let's talk about what the CMMC Readiness Program really is, and that's 6 steps or 6 stages that take a client from really the beginning points all the way through the process and ready them to be able to sit down and be able to answer an audit for CMMC. This starts with deployment. How are we deploying the services? How are we making sure you're in the right platforms so that you are already positioned to be able to move forward? In this case, most times we're working with the Microsoft Cloud. The second step is securing the environment, locking it down, making sure we're controlling the devices and the accesses and the access to that system itself. When we get to defend, we transition to a more active role where we employ things like threat hunting, security incident event managers, cloud security, and get much more active in pursuit of potential problems and make sure that everything is not just secure, but we're always monitoring and managing it. The monitor piece, this is where our friends at Conquest are going to fit in by layering in the vigilance, the 24/7 security operations center, so that we're always constantly monitoring the network from a security standpoint, and then being able to lead and take those feeds and put them into a platform that not just gives us a full picture of what our security profile is, but also our compliance profile is really a tremendous asset and a tremendous power to be able to add to the stuff that we do when we deploy our services. The final 2 areas in govern and manage. With govern, it's all about controlling the flow of CUI, both within and outside your organization, with things like data labeling, information protection. We've got a ton of work that we're doing in that area, and we've got some great content lined up coming in the future to talk about that area. And then finally, manage is how do we support you on an ongoing basis? Some of our clients like to have regular contact. Some of our clients like to just need occasional support. Other folks really are looking for an outsourced IT program. We can do some level of that depending on what your needs are and what your resources are. So I'm going to take a minute or two and kind of walk through this as if we were going through a client experience. And that kind of starts with the deployment side of it. This is all about putting you into the right platform. As I mentioned earlier, we can do this in GCC High. We can do this in any version of the Microsoft 365 platform. Typically involves licensing. In a lot of cases, if there's a move from one platform to the other, there's a data migration around email and whatever the data file stores are. Maybe that's OneDrive and Teams and SharePoint. Maybe that's a file server. But getting you into the right platform and making sure that you're up and running. From a license focus, for folks that are moving along in a phased approach, this typically is a baseline of an Office 365 E3 license, as well as some ancillary services around backup and voice. The next step in our program is secure. Secure is all about locking and securing access to the environment. We deploy conditional access policies in Azure Active Directory, and we combine that with features like device enrollment and app protection policies to make sure that all of the access to your content is secured and compliant. From a license standpoint, this tends to get us into the old EMS E3 licensing with Azure Active Directory and Intune, and we deploy these services to make sure that we've got our perimeter locked down for the environment. The next step is defend. And at defend, we're transitioning from securing the perimeter and securing access into a more active pursuit of threats and breaches. Things like advanced threat protection, cloud app security, and Windows Defender are all deployed to make sure that now we are actively watching the environment and making sure that if there are any signals that could possibly suggest a breach, we're on the case. We're working on it, and we're then taking all of that rich data and putting it into Azure Sentinel. Azure Sentinel is the Microsoft Security Incident Event Manager, and it allows us to now, with this full complex of data logs and feeds, be able to not just be able to take signals, but start to apply AI type processes in there. So if you have, say, a risky login or a geographically impossible login, those things are all alerts, they're all coming into play, and we're all getting notice of that. And this is where Conquest Cyber fits into our program. With Monitor, they can provide the 24/7 vigilance of a security operations center, and they can also provide the executive dashboards that not only give us the ability to see where our security posture is, but our compliance posture as well. I'm not going to steal too much of Ben's thunder on that. I'm going to let him dive into it, but this is where we fit and we tie everything together to be able to have an operational system. Just again, talking briefly about govern and the fact that, you know, one of the least talked about things in the whole CMMC process is not just about securing your environment, but how do you secure that incident, that actual data? And we can do that with things like data labeling, information protection, as well as some other solutions we have in that space around workspace governance. And then the last piece that I'll talk about is manage. Again, this is about how do we support from an ongoing perspective. Some of our clients just want a little bit of support, maybe a couple of hours a month to have kind of a call a friend type of model where you can come in and help with projects or certain challenges that they may be having. Other folks want a more ongoing managed services, which we can offer up to and including essentially an outsourced IT service. So wherever you are with your resources and your capabilities, we can have a solution put together that we already have put together that will allow you to be able to get the right level of support you need for your services. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ben, let him talk a little bit about Conquest Cyber and how their services layer in and provide value for our clients.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bill. That was a great overview. I appreciate the intro and the handoff. So thank you for joining everybody today. My name is Ben Tosado with Conquest Cyber. I run our business development functions here at Conquest Cyber, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how we work with customers like yourselves and our partner at C3 and Bill to help customers not only get compliant with CMMC, but make sure that they've got overall program effectiveness and the appropriate protection in place to make sure that that their environments don't get compromised. So just a little bit about Conquest Cyber here at the top, right? So we're focused on helping customers leverage the cloud to become more secure, compliant, and to have overall improved security and compliance program effectiveness. We do that by monitoring the cloud technologies that Bill was just mentioning in his presentation out of 3 SOC 2 ITAR compliant SOC facilities, and providing customers with 24/7 protection, proactive threat hunting, and automated SIM service in their environment to make sure that we're catching any potential threats that you guys are facing inside of your technology environment. Then we're taking all of the information that we're gathering in monitoring your environment, and we're comparing it up with your compliance program, and then putting that all together in a dashboard called ARMED, which I'm going to show you guys in a little while, that really brings compliance and overall security operations and program effectiveness into one outcome that you can monitor from one place and see how those two things are impacting each other. See things like, okay, well, I think I'm in compliance with a specific control. What's actually happening from a monitoring perspective in my environment, and are those two things matching up? And figuring out where your overall program from a CMMC perspective or a NIST perspective are at in real time, and being able to make adjustments in your environment to make sure that you're continuously managing compliance and overall security, program effectiveness, and protection. So this is a little bit about our partnership with Microsoft. Very much like C3, we've got a strong partnership with Microsoft. We focus on a lot of Microsoft cloud and security technology, our monitoring and SOC operations, as well as the ARM platform that I'm gonna demo for you guys, is all built on top of Microsoft tech. So that's not to say that we can't help customers that aren't pure play Microsoft from a security perspective. We've got customers using a variety of different SIM platforms and endpoint protection platforms, variety of different security tech in the environment. We can help customers with heterogeneous environments like that. We like to recommend that customers focus on Microsoft because it helps with overall simplicity and cost, which we're gonna talk about a little bit in a few minutes as well. So this is a little bit about our value add and what we're doing, what we're striving to do in customer environments as we're getting engaged. So the ARM platform pulls everything together from strategy, operations, architecture and engineering, compliance, and an easy to use customer experience that's really built for a risk executive inside of an organization, whether that's an IT lead or a CISO or a business owner. Really being able to see where your cyber risk is at, where your overall compliance program's at, where your overall protection from a security operations perspective is at, in one kind of easy to manage place. The idea here is to help organizations save time and reduce complexity for both managing a security operations program as well as managing an effective compliance program, right? One of the issues with compliance that I know many of you are probably running up against. I've talked to many customers in the defense industrial base that are running up against it now with the CMMC requirements and the audits that are impending for that, is compliance can be a costly endeavor, right? Both from a systems implementation perspective, a tooling perspective, and then Bill was mentioning earlier, you know, it's not just getting the practices in place, it's also going ahead and making sure that you've got the appropriate policies and procedures around those practices, documented and implemented, and that you're managing and monitoring the environment on an ongoing basis. So we strive to make that less onerous and less complex by giving you kind of one interface to manage all of that, in addition to the ongoing eyes on glass and monitoring that you need to make sure that your environment's safe, right? So we do that by employing risk management and compliance expertise, adaptive risk management, and real-time visibility into security controls, which I mentioned earlier. You're going to be able to see when controls are drifting out of compliance based on the information we're pulling from your environment, from Sentinel and other security tools that Microsoft's got, that Bill mentioned earlier. So this is a little bit about the defense industrial base. This is part of a CMMC educational webinar that we give on a regular basis. So one of the interesting things about the space, right? Everybody in the space that's handling CUI, as Bill mentioned, is really going to have to comply with level CMMC regulations, right, or 130 practices that the CMMC standards have laid out, and that CMMC C3PAOs are going to be auditing for. That's 20 practices more than the 800 171 controls that were in place beforehand that weren't being verified and audited, right? It was basically based on the honor system. So now not only is there going to be an audit process in place for folks who need to handle CUI in their environments, not only are there more practices and practice areas that you've got to implement, but a lot of the folks that are in the space that handle CUI are small businesses, right? So you end up in a scenario where you've got enterprise level security and compliance requirements, and probably not a huge technology organization to implement and manage the technologies you need for those practices. Maybe not a huge, governance and compliance team that can write the policies, procedures, system security plans that you need to pass a compliance audit, and probably not the security operations team that you need to provide effective ongoing monitoring. So what we do when we go to market with partners like C3 is provide you with a set of organizations you can partner with that can give you the pieces you need to run an overall effective CMMC program, and make sure that you've got the program maturity and effectiveness to protect yourselves, right? That's the ultimate goal. So this is a little bit about one of our discovery and assessment engagements. We work with our partners and their customers to kind of put together, overall pictures of where they're at and where they need to be from a compliance perspective. This is everything from figuring out where you're at in terms of a timeline and the need to reach a certain level of compliance. This varies contractor to contractor. In the defense industrial base, we're very involved with the CMMCAB, and on their last town hall, they were describing how folks that were providing specific products and services were going to be at level 1 versus level 3 or higher based on the information that they were handling. So it's, hey, where do I want to be based on conversations with the customers and the government and the understanding of the regulations, which we can help with. Where are you guys at today? Right? What do we need to do in terms of gap remediation to get you from where you're at to where you want to be? And then, working with C3, with our team to be able to plug those gaps and then manage and monitor the program on an ongoing basis to make sure once you achieve a compliant state, you maintain it. And then again, you've got that overall program and maturity effectiveness, being managed on an ongoing basis so that your environment's protected. So this is a little bit about some customer environments and how we find them getting architected, right? So we've got customers that are completely focused on DoD business. We've got customers that have a hybrid of DoD and non-DoD government or commercial business. So we work with our partners and our customers to put together environments with things like enclaves for CUI. So if you've got a hybrid of DoD and non-DoD business, and you want to take a system boundary and just put it around your specific CUI environment with the users that need to access CUI as well as the CUI information itself, and then focus your audit readiness, your monitoring service, right? The Microsoft software that's required for CUI, right? Like GCC High and some of the G5 security components that Bill had mentioned, and put that in kind of a subset of your environment. You can do that, and then allow folks to access that environment as well as a commercial environment that doesn't have the same requirements in terms of being audited, having to maintain control requirements, having to be monitored, et cetera, et cetera. So some of you that are completely 100% focused on government and DoD business are probably not going to do this. You'll probably just say, hey, the whole environment has to be compliant. For those of you that have a hybrid business where you've got some commercial business or a large amount of commercial business and DoD, it might be something that you want to consider and look at. We have several customers that are international companies where they've got a subset of their business, let's say 20 or 25% of their business that's DoD oriented. They've got folks working overseas on a variety of different commercial things, and we're just helping them with the CMMC, the DoD, the DFARS, the CUI kind of environment, right? And monitoring and providing the overall service that I'm describing to you for that piece. So this is a little bit more about the service mapping. So the idea here is to work with C3, work with you guys to provide an all-up service that includes building everything out, right? Includes helping you with compliance support, and then includes helping you with the overall monitoring and managed aspects that you need to get CMMC compliant. And this really maps back to Bill's messaging for the overall C3 program, right? The idea is to give you all the pieces that you need to really get as far down the road as you can with CMMC Level 3 compliance, right? In this example, we've got it broken down into 86% of the 130 controls. And then what the customer ends up with is things like having to maintain physical security, maintaining personnel security, maintaining media security, right? All the things that really don't necessarily fit directly into of the technology part of the program. And then, as Bill mentioned earlier, we've got partners that can provide you guys with compliance support for those. So even if we can't, maintain a physical security control for you, we can probably help you figure out how to write a policy and procedure for that. So this is a little bit more about the Microsoft story, right? So we believe that simplicity is the friend of security. So it's easier to run a compliant program if you've got a set of tools that are well integrated, where you've got an easy to use integrated interface to monitor and manage those tools, right? Microsoft provides you with that. A really complex heterogeneous environment doesn't. There's a lot of custom integration that has to happen. Monitoring an environment like that from a SIM perspective is harder. So we recommend that the customers focus on Microsoft as an opportunity to bring security into an easier to manage environment. There's also a cost benefit to this, right? And replacing other point solutions inside of an environment, we believe customers can save and meet all of the requirements, have all of the tooling in place that they need to go ahead and pass a level CMMC or a level 3 CMMC audit, as well as have overall program maturity and effectiveness to make sure their environments are protected. So this is mapping some of the different kind of controls, the different controls back to technologies that are inside of that Microsoft suite. So you can see, and we've got detailed control mappings for all of this stuff, right? We've worked with Microsoft and developed worked on a placemat that they've developed that really lets us understand and almost turn on and off in a tool kind of which controls we're trying to meet and which tools in the Microsoft suite fit those controls. So this is stuff that you can buy in government cloud from Bill, work with C3 to implement, and then have us monitor it for you and meet a variety of control requirements with a combination of our services as partners and the overall software and cloud-based tool inheritance that you're going to get for controls. So this is a little bit about how we're integrating with Microsoft to be able to provide you guys with an overall view into what's going on in your program and how effective and compliant it is at any given time, right? So this is an example of some of the Microsoft tools that we work with, right? So Azure Security Center, ATP, some of this stuff has been rebranded as well, by the way, Azure Threat Protection, Cloud App Security, Azure Identity Protection, Endpoint Protection, Defender for Endpoints also in there, right? So we're taking all of those security technologies. We're taking the Sentinel implementations that Bill mentioned to you guys earlier, and we're going ahead and tying those into our environment with Azure Lighthouse, which is a program that's part of Azure that lets us manage multiple Azure tenant environments and show customers and implement policy, procedure, run books, automations inside of customer Sentinel environments. We're monitoring all of that in our 3 SOC 2 ITAR compliance SOC facilities on a 24/7 basis. We're building all the automations into the tools that you guys need and correlations you need. We've got over 1,000 correlations for Sentinel that are designed for defense industrial base to make sure that we're doing the best job we can on that monitoring, and we're seeing stuff as it's coming in. We're also doing advanced threat hunting inside of the environment to look for and address advanced persistent threats, which if you noticed on the chart that was presented earlier, that's really what levels 4 and 5 of the CMMC framework are based on. We're expecting more folks to be required to comply with level 4 and 5 because of some of the prominent advanced persistent threat attacks that have come out in the news recently, right? So things where a piece of software gets compromised, it's sitting inside of the environment, laying there as kind of a latent threat, and then an attacker comes in and exploits it at a given time. Those are the things that we're kind of out there looking for in that threat hunting. So we're doing all of the monitoring, and then we're pulling that all together inside of Armed, right? So Armed is going to be where you can see what's going on from a security operations perspective, what's going on from a risk management perspective, what's going on from a compliance perspective, all in one consolidated view that you can get either from a web interface or on a mobile app. It runs inside of Microsoft Azure, so it's an easy to use kind of view of the whole thing. So this is a little bit more on the access controls, of the CMMC controls. Access controls, the first kind of category that we'll show you some detail about in a minute in the tool, but basically, what you're left with control by control by partnering with C3, with Conquest, and with Microsoft to buy, implement, and monitor all of this software. You can actually retire a majority of the controls in the program, right? So now you're only left owning a small number of controls. You're getting policy and procedure help for those controls if you need it. You're doing what's recommended in the policy and procedures. All the rest of these controls are taken care of and inherited, and now the audit process gets a lot simpler, right? And less expensive to prepare for, less expensive to execute. So I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is kind of a high-level framework of how we're pulling everything together. So we start with compliance mappings, the service offerings that Bill mentioned earlier, technology inputs, right? So this is all about, what are the compliance goals? What are the overall kind of service offerings that help initially assess and achieve the compliance goals? What are the technology inputs we need to maintain a secure, mature, effective, compliant program on an ongoing basis? And then pulling all of those things together with technology in the cloud as well as integrated workflows to give you guys an overall view in the software of where your program's at, right? From a 360-degree view, again, security, maturity, effectiveness, and compliance. And we do that over the course of several modules in the software that I'm gonna show you in a few minutes. So Armed, right? We've got several different modules. We've got IO, which is where we baseline customers' environments, right? And we find out kind of where you're at, where you want to go from a compliance perspective, input that, and we can show you where you are from an overall maturity perspective. Inspect is where we overlay industry-specific frameworks like CMMC so that you can manage your CMMC program. I'm going to show you guys SOC today. That's where we're integrating with overall security operations. Overwatch lets you manage third-party risk, right? So third-party risk is something that's I know important for a lot of you in the defense industrial base, right? Because there are flow down requirements for CMMC that I'm sure most of you have heard about. If you've got a subcontract based community, or if you're doing some prime stuff and some stuff, sub stuff, then you've got to make sure that you're making sure that your subs are compliant as well. Arms room, we're actually going to be able to layer technology on top of an enterprise architecture and a program to determine the overall effectiveness and ROI gains you get with implementing specific security tech. We're going to be able to create design basis threats in a module called evaluate, and then do adversary simulation exercises to see where to really test the effectiveness of the program, right? And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into a demo. So this is ARMED. This is our strategic cyber operations platform. And again, the overall goal here is to give you a product that ensures you've got compliance, maturity, and effectiveness in your security operations and your overall compliance program, right? So we're bringing together both real-time feeds from your environment as well as assistance in gathering information about your compliance program to give you a real-time view of where you're at, right? So the overall maturity and effectiveness we're measuring with NIST CSF, right? We baseline customers in NIST CSF, so you can see on the home page here we've got a radiograph that shows you each NIST CSF domain, right? Or NIST CSF function, excuse me. So identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, and then gives you an idea based on the information we gather in onboarding and put into the tool for you on where you're at, and then where you're at versus your target maturity profile. We give you different recommendations, right, on the main page here on what you can do from a risk awareness, strategic defense, compliance, and operational awareness perspective to improve the maturity of your program and the effectiveness of your program, right? We also do an industry comparison for you based on industry data that we pull in on where you're at. So evaluate is where we can take things like threat intel, like a list of hardware assets and software assets. We can look at asset vulnerability and criticality, and we can go ahead and start figuring out which assets we need to focus on in the environment, and then create design basis threats for the environment that we can use to run adversary simulation on. So a lot of folks ask me, why, what needs to be done beyond implementing CMMC level controls, right? Level 3 controls, let's say, if you need to maintain that level of compliance. A lot of those practices have been around for 4 or 5 years, right? I mean, I think it was in 2016 when the 800-171 controls, which 110 of the 130 CMMC level 3 controls were required, right? That was kind of the overall effectiveness bar in 16. If you look at the cyber landscape today, it's become much more sophisticated, right? You've got adversaries that are much more sophisticated. You've got threats that are much better planned out and executed. So being able to go and do risk assessments, look at your overall hardware assets, look at your software assets, look at vulnerabilities in the environment and threat intel, and then really build a picture around where you have risk and mitigating it is really an initial step that you've got to take to really have an effective program beyond just checking the box and meeting compliance controls. So IO, this is where we baseline customer environments and provide strategic defense oriented information, right? So you can see again the 5 NIST CSF functions, and we can pop into any of the functions, look at the actual components, and then evaluate where you're at, where you have evidence for each one of the NIST CSF functions. And this is going to be what drives the initial picture of how mature and effective your program is. And then we're going to be pulling information in from security operations to go ahead and change your view based on what we actually see happening in your environment. And that's where the real-time compliance oriented information comes in. So this is where we baseline stuff. Then if we go into inspect, this is where we start talking about compliance, right? So now we've started with an overall assessment that looks at program maturity and effectiveness, strategic defense, is your environment protected? And now we're moving into, okay, based on the practices that we baselined for you, let's compare that to the CMMC, let's say level 3 controls, and then figure out where you're at in each one of the CMMC domains. So you get a global view here with a high level view of where you're at on each domain. Let's go ahead and drill down and see where you're at versus each one of the CMMC controls, right? Let's be able to automatically generate policies and procedures, right? And this is stuff that we can help you augment, right? Based on some of the system templates we have and your requirements. And then let's go in and give you a place to do automated collection of evidence, right? And this system aggregates this stuff so that you get it in a single view, right? If you, when you need to go ahead and go through an audit, you can actually give audit access to an auditor here. They can see all of the evidence in a curated list in one place. And it's actually linking back to storage that's in your GCC high environment. So if you need to do things like checksums to maintain chain of evidence, you can, and it's sitting inside of your environment, but this consolidates it all in one place and then relates it back to the status of your program in the tool. We can also do workflow alerts for control drift. So what this lets you do is set an alert so that if the environment, the security operations environment tells us we're drifting out of compliance with a control that's green, you get an alert telling you that that's actually turning red, right? So you can take actions to correct that. So from a security operations center perspective, this is where all of the interaction happens with the security operations center. So I mentioned earlier, we're really focused on delivering security and compliance, right? Maturity and effectiveness and compliance all together in an outcome and in one place for you guys to manage it. So you've got your complete interface with the SOC here. You can review SOC reports, drill down into SOC tickets, see who they've been assigned to, what system generated them, what the progress on completing them has been. You get SOC-oriented dashboards and reports. We've got your incident response matrix and plan built into this. So this is, you can contact the SOC through this to send a CSOC request. Go ahead and open a case. So this is your entire interface with the SOC as well. And then again, we're integrating this back with the program, right, with your compliance program. So if anything from here doesn't jive with what we've got from a compliance perspective, based on the workflows and integrations we're running on the back end in the tool, we'll alert you. So Overwatch is our third-party risk module. So this is where we're looking at vendors or subcontractors or subordinate organizations, going ahead and doing assessment on their environment, right, with the tool, integrating that with yours as a subordinate organization relationship, and then showing you where your risk rating are for each one of the subordinate organizations, so that you can constantly be aware of what that picture looks like, right? The reason that this is important for the DIB is you guys have a lot of requirements around making sure that your subcontractors are compliant, right, with CMMC. So we're working with a variety of our larger customers today on programs that are just specifically designed to address thousands of subcontractors using this part of the tool and the strategic cyber operations service out of the SOC, right? So really critical kind of part for the defense industrial base here. Arms room is where we take each one of the functions inside of, or each one of the, I should say, the modules inside of the tool, and we look at different components, right, that can impact the customer's program, and then let them look at the overall maturity and effectiveness of those different tools, so that they can see how they're impacting their overall program. And then last but not least, if you want to drill down into any of the NIST CSF functions here, you can actually look at tactical components that we're pulling in from your technology environment. that are impacting your overall maturity, right, and effectiveness. As I mentioned earlier, we're using the technology as well as the compliance information to see where you're at, and then you can see how that's impacting you from a tactical or a strategic perspective, right? So the tactical stuff is going to give you counts of equipment and different numbers of assets that are and aren't inside of the program, right? Variety of different things like that we can pick up with technology, and then the strategic indicators are going to drill into the domains that are within the NIST CSF functions, and then show you where you're at via those. So that's the high level dashboard, or the high level demo of ARMED. So with that, I will turn it back over.
Great, thanks, Ben. That was really great being able to go through all of that and see everything that the Conquest solution can do and how it overlays into what I think a lot of clients are already on the pathway to doing and working towards. But this is the part that ties it all together and brings that intersection between not just deploying services and getting things working, but also being able to link that directly into your compliance posture. And obviously, at some point, you're going to sit down for an audit. So everything's already teed up to be able to start putting that evidence in there and stacking everything up and making that process go even more efficiently and faster.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the idea, right? We want to make sure that compliance is easier for organizations in the DIB, and that at the same time, we're making sure that they're protected and they've got overall program maturity and effectiveness.
I think one of the things that's really powerful also is that compliance drift component of there. When we're looking at it from the perspective of compliance, you have a fallback, or you have a little bit of a fail-safe to say, yes, my maturity is strong because I've got automation that's helping me ensure that I got things right. But also, just from a pure validation standpoint, one more check to make sure that your environment is completely locked down and secure, and the entire organization is doing the things they should be doing. So that's a really powerful capability.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. The team that designed this platform was comprised of a group of former CISOs, right? And one of the things that my peer, who was a former Fortune 500 CISO, just drove him crazy when he was running compliance programs in that role, was that he would never know where he was at any given time in terms of compliance with the control, right? So you do kind of a point in time assessment, and you know where you're at then. But if stuff in your environment's changing and you don't know about it, that's impacting your compliance with those controls, a couple of days after that, you're not sure where you're at, so you do another self-assessment or you get audited. So that's exactly what the system's designed to do, kind of keep a customer up to date on where they're at with running their program in real time.
I think it's fantastic. I said it's really a powerful piece to this. And Karen, want to just kick it back over to you, see if there's any questions. I know we're starting to run a little short on time, but I think we can probably get a couple in.
Yep, we are. We got a few minutes left. One question that we did have was about the length of time it takes to get CMMC certified, and whether you guys, based on your perhaps previous clients or just experience in the space, about how long it takes to get through that process.
Yeah, sure. So obviously from an audit perspective, the C3 PAOs, the first group, is still going through. We're still looking at provisional audits. Probably not even going to be able to start doing them until later this year at some point. I'm guessing second half of the year. But in terms of the process of preparing to be ready for an audit, the first thing that's going to drive that is how mature is your cybersecurity to start with. Usually one of those telltale signs for me is, have you gone and done something like an ISO certification or a CMMI? Have you already put investment into both security technology as well as documentation? Then you're probably pretty far along the way. If you're starting from almost ground zero, or you're kind of pretty close to that, then we're seeing folks take at least 6 and probably closer to 12 months to be ready. And part of that is, first of all, you've got to get yourself into a compliant platform. You've got to make sure that you're investing in the right licensing and the right platform and the right solutions that are going to give you a foundation to be able to achieve compliance. And then what we see with our clients, they all have a different schedule. Some folks want to move fast, some folks don't. Even if you're moving at a pretty good rate, by the time you add in the access controls, you enroll your devices, you start adding in the cloud app security and the threat hunting, and then layering in the SEM, and then we tie in the monitoring capabilities, that can easily be a 6-month project for a lot of clients. And even smaller clients can still take a little more time because, ironically enough, even though there may be less users, there's more stretched resources. So it's harder to get time and availability to do that. Everyone's got day jobs. And then you also have to factor in the fact that you're demonstrating maturity for an audit. Don't think you're going to turn something on Friday and sit down for an audit on Monday. You need to have a track record. There's a little bit of debate right now as to how much is there, but I think you should assume that you need to have at least 3 months of operations in what you would consider a compliant environment before you're going to be able to really get through an audit capability. So all that adds up very easily, 9 to 12 months, without even really going through any real challenges or hurdles along the way. Ben, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, from what we're hearing from the CMMC AB, you're going to need at least 3 months of track record, documented policies and procedures, evidence that you've been following them in a compliant way for you to pass an audit. So if you start walking back from there, right, once you have all the practices and the technology that you need in place, you've got to add 3 months on top of that, right? So talking about 6 months, right? That only gives you 3 months to kind of get everything that you need to in place. So folks that are starting from scratch, I think definitely need to be starting to work on the program as soon as possible, because we are hearing that the CMMC AB is getting ready to launch the program, right? They're training the first couple of C3PAOs. They're training contract officers on how to implement the practices into the contracts and solicitations. So this is going to be coming soon.
Absolutely.
Great. We have one more question, and it actually segues nicely. So Stuart asked, what audit support do you provide, and do you guarantee passing a CMMC level?
That's a little bit of a loaded question. So within our services, our services, when we look at compliance, it's about people, process, and technology. Our focus is always going to be on the technology. We very much recommend our clients work with a compliance professional. In a lot of cases, that's in-house to them. A lot of cases, that is an outside consultant. Ultimately, compliance is the client's responsibility. We're going to do everything we can to help you get there, but there's always things that are out of our control. Sometimes, well, certainly things like physical security, guest logs, posting to public places, we can't control that. We can't always control what a client does once we put things in place. If you're going to manage your environment, we can set everything up fine, and tomorrow you could go turn off your device management. We actually had a client who did that, who once we handed stuff over, we went back and we were talking to them three months later. They were doing an internal review, and it turned out their IT tech turned something off. So the idea of guaranteeing compliance and accreditation is a little bit of a tall hurdle to hit for us, but we'll do everything we can to get you there. Ben, I'm happy to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that Bill's absolutely right. There's no way that any provider organization, right, either one of our companies can guarantee you're going to pass an audit. What we can do, so one of the biggest risks in a compliance audit, and a lot of folks don't think of it this way, but is in the differences, different ways different auditors are going to interpret the regulations and then apply them to your organization, your practices, these types of things. What we can do is recommend auditors for you guys, right? So Bill's got a relationship with a variety of different auditors that we're familiar with, and that we know how they're going to apply the regulations to your environment, or have a little bit more certainty there. So we can probably help you in that way, but nobody can guarantee you're going to pass the audit.
Yeah, I'll absolutely add on to that in terms of, we're still waiting to find out how they're going to interpret some of these things. There's a lot of guidance, there's the assessment guides, there's all those pieces there, but we're still not really sure how they're going to grade some of the answers to that. And there will definitely be, they've talked all along, there will be some course corrections on that. And I would also venture to say that if someone were, for me to guarantee you passing an audit, you've got to give me the keys to your environment. And that means that you are going to listen to what I do. There's not going to be any questions on it, because I'm going to assume the risk, and therefore I'm going to take complete control of your environment. Most organizations don't want to give up that level of control.
Great, makes sense.
Yep.
I think that's about it, and we're at officially 2:02. So unless there's anything else, we can definitely wrap up. Just a reminder again, the presentation will be made available, and then hopefully everyone can see this last screen here that has contact information for both Bill and Ben. You can find them both on LinkedIn and reach out to them as well via their email addresses and on their websites. So I think that wraps up. Thanks so much, guys, for your time, and thanks to all of our attendees for joining us today. We really appreciate both your time and your attention.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.